Welcome to the Omni Sports Podcast. Featuring your host, Bobby Labita. Hello and welcome back to another week of the Omni Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Labita, back for week 23 action. And if you experienced a tornado that sent you to a faraway land with a bunch of strange people, and the first thing you did was murder a witch in that place, and now you're like, what has happened in basketball? Don't worry, hopefully you're home, and I got you this week. But before we get into week 23 news, let's get into our sponsor this week. And our sponsor this week is your mother. That's right. She gave me a lot of money. You might want to check your inheritance, because it may not be there.
So in the last 10 head-to-head meetings between Houston and Dallas, the Mavs have beaten the Rockets 6 times when Luka plays. And in those 6 wins, he's averaging 37 a game. He's got 35 now. Oh, no. No.
You gotta go. He's
no.
This is about as high as we've seen at
No way.
Trial.
That's right, toot! We're back for another installment of Tooting My Horn. Now, in the past, I've always been quick to admit when I've been a dum-dum, and most of this year, my dum-dum takes actually have not been takes. It's just my inability to say people's names. But I felt, you know what? It's time to swing the scale and balances in the other direction. And it's time to toot this horn. And no, I'm not talking about the horn tooting that's happened, because I've had a lot of sugar-free candy this week in the spirit of trying to be low carb. And whew, that's another kind of tooting that I don't wish upon anyone and their family. But the tooting that I do wish upon is being correct. And I am gonna soak in the sun of being correct in this moment, because a couple months ago, January specifically, I was like, yo, Luka Doncic should be considered more heavily for the MVP conversation. He should be looked at. The Mavs are a sleeper team in the West and all of these things. And lo and behold, I wake up today. Well, it's been a couple days that this has been true. Luka is second in the MVP standings in terms of likelihood to get it. Today, Luka and the Mavs snapped the Rockets' 11-game win streak, and Luka had 47 points. But that wasn't the end of Luka's week this week. Probably one of the most savage moments of the week and maybe even the year. Luka Doncic, as the Mavericks put away the Kings in a game earlier this week, he waved to former general manager Vlad Divac of the Kings, who was seated courtside, and he said, he should have drafted me. Now, for context, Luka was the 3rd pick. Before him were picks by the Kings and the Hawks. And so, very famously, he kind of wants to, a lot of athletes want to do this. They want to clown or attack or make stupid look the teams that didn't draft them. And Luka's been doing that for a while. A lot of people back when Luka was being drafted were like, this is a draft, like, generational caliber player. Why is he not going first? But teams were scared. He was the European MVP, but like, does EuroLeague translate? And Luka's shown that it's translating. He's playing some of the best basketball I've ever seen him play in his life. And my horn it's been tooted, and tooting it shall do.
Storylines of the week. 1.
For the San Antonio Spurs to get the win. McBride throws it down. Wembanyama has it, and it's over. Knicks fall short in one of the most thrilling and exhausting games we've ever seen. In overtime, Jalen Brunson's masterpiece comes up just short. An incredible 61 points in one of the great Knicks performances of all time.
One shy of tying Melo's record of 62.
But Victor Wembanyama with a 40-20 game.
We had an incredibly exciting game this week. An overtime game featuring the Knicks and the Spurs. Now, you wouldn't expect the Spurs to be playing for much at this time of the year. They're handily outside of any important races, and in fact you'd probably expect them to be tanking. But no, the Spurs have been playing good, and even the teams that they've been facing that are good teams. They've sometimes lose, but they've been playing competitive games. But this week, Jalen Brunson had his career high against the Spurs. He had 61 points, obliterating his previous career high. But it didn't matter because Wemby had his first 40-point game and a 20 rebound game, and the Spurs were able to best the Knicks 130-126 this week. And Wemby became the first rookie since Shaq to have a 40-point, 20 rebound game. And this game was just awesome. No one could really stop Jalen Brunson, but it didn't matter because no one could stop Wemby. And it was just one of the most fun games I think I've seen in a long time. Especially, I like rooting for these teams. I like rooting for Jalen Brunson. I think he's a great leader. He plays basketball the right way. And you see Wemby just growing every week. And it was, I think a good foreshadowing of some amazing games that are yet to come in the NBA with Wemby and Jalen Brunson. We have this list of amazing superstars who are kind of in the twilight of their career, but I don't think the NBA needs to worry because there's a lot of amazing stars coming out of the woodwork who will be amazing faces for this league.
What did you think of the Draymond injection?
All I say is we need him. He knows that. We all know that. So whatever it takes to keep him on the floor, and be available, that's what's got to happen. Especially at this point in the year. So it's a tough way to start the game, but I am extremely proud of every single person that stepped foot on the floor tonight and responded the way that they did, because back to back, a team as physical as they are, we got contributions from everybody.
Speaking of stars beginning to sunset, this week we had kind of an interesting experience that I don't think I've ever seen from Steph Curry before. Now, Draymond Green kind of forgot his therapy this week. In a game earlier this week, he, as Patty Mills was running by, kind of grabbed his neck and choked him. And that obviously wasn't good. And then the very next game, Draymond Green got 2 technical fouls within 4 minutes and was ejected, which, strangely enough, was not the fastest he's ever been ejected from a game. But this led to an incredibly emotional reaction from Steph Curry that I don't think I have ever seen. Now, a lot of people who were looking at this video felt that Steph was, angry. And that might be part of it, but he just looked distraught. He looked sad. He looked like he was crying. He looked like how you might, you have a heart-to-heart with your bestie and you're like, hey, stop going back to that girl. And they're like, yeah, man, you're right. She's terrible for me. She's breaking my heart. And you're like, yeah, bro, move on. And then the next day you see him post on his Instagram story that they're together. And you're like, bro, damn it. I thought we did it. I thought we fixed you. But no, you're back with her. And that her in this metaphor is Draymond Green's anger. Immediately after the game, Draymond apologized, saying he couldn't do that. Steph Curry said absolutely it was Draymond's fault and he shouldn't do that. And this is new. Draymond has been handled with kid gloves for a very long time. And this is the most, Steph Curry immediately rejected it after the game. Usually Steph Curry has to do is, I don't know, I haven't seen the play. Could be bad, could be good, I don't know, right? But he flat out rejected it. And Steph Curry, this game was against the Magic, ended up carrying the Warriors to a win. But at the end of the game, when Steph had pretty much solidified the game with a three-point dagger, he kicked some chairs and he was screaming and he was mad. And again, this is also something I have never seen from Steph. And so I wonder if the Warriors feel the pressure, they feel the cracks and the seams starting to form. And, I wonder if there's a part of them that knows deep down maybe their best years are behind them, which is unfortunate. So Draymond, regardless of how I feel about you as a person, I would hope that you would see how this affects your teammate, your friend, and, get it together. Because, the poor Steph, I've never seen him so distraught. Even in big games that they've lost, this is the most distraught I've seen him, because I think this is just beyond basketball. It's losing a friend or losing trust in a friend. And in sports, in team sports, trust with your teammates is one of the few things you have.
3. They're going to do a lot of switching here. Matthews needs help and gets it into Murray. The floor is spread. It's Holiday. It's Murray from the top. Good! With 1/10 of a second, and the Hawks go in front, 123 to 122. I can't believe it. He did it again. Wow.
The Hawks have gotten hot this week. Now, they beat the Celtics twice. Now, before I get into how impressive it is, the Celtics are kind of resting and they're kind of, they're kind of vibing right now. They've clinched a home field advantage for the playoffs. However, that should not discredit what we saw this week, especially because in some of the games Celtics players were playing. So in the first game that we're going to be talking about this week with the Hawks and Celtics, both came down to the end. The first was the game that went into overtime, which was the most recent game, which led to DeJounte Murray hitting a game-winning two-pointer with 0.1 seconds left in overtime. And it was wild. DeJounte was hot in the fourth quarter. I think he scored almost more than the entire Celtics team. And he ended up having over 40 points. It wasn't necessarily the most efficient game. I think he had 47 shots, which was the most shots in a game since Kobe until Jalen Brunson 61-point game this week. Funny how things like that happen. But we see with Murray, he loves having the ball. He loves taking the ball. And he loves being ball dominant. Sometimes that's not always efficient. However, it was efficient enough this week to pull them to the win. But then you also had one of the more fun, another game with the Celtics and Hawks, which again came down to the very end. And this came down to the fourth quarter instead of overtime. And DeAndre Hunter had the ball and the Hawks are up by 1. And so when you have the ball and you're up, you want to take as much time as you can. But Hunter did not care. With 9 seconds left, threw up a three-pointer and ended up winning. So it ended up working. But I'm sure all Hawks fans were like, what are you doing? No. Oh, I'm sorry, my friend. Keep shooting that. And we could see that the Hawks, who are at the tail end of the play-in, they're going to get into the play-in, but it's not going to be pretty. This is one of those things I feel conflicted. I think the play-in, for example, what it's doing for the West is beautiful. It's going to lead to a lot of drama and a lot of fun, high-stakes games. And I look at the East, where the 9th and 10th seeds are just clearly a tier or even 2 tiers below the teams above them, and it's just one of those teams that absolutely gets slaughtered by the Celtics. But maybe it won't be the Hawks, since they slaughtered the Celtics this week. Who knows?
He did what?
He was on the run. He was on the move when he got the carom. LeBron doing a little dance out on front, out on top. Now in the corner.
Look at him. Look at him. Take a seat, LeBron. Come on. What?
How about that?
You don't see LeBron take a fadeaway off the dribble very often.
Here he is. LeBron James working with Claxton in front of him.
It's going up.
LeBron, here it goes. Yes! Yes!
LeBron.
He is the man!
Stop showing off, LeBron.
LeBronathan Prometheus James had 40 points, 7 rebounds, and 5 assists today in his game against the Nets. And that's impressive. But what's most impressive to me, and why LeBron earns Performance of the Week, is he got 9 out of 10 3-pointers, which is amazing. Anyone shoots 90% from 3. This has led LeBron to actually having his best 3-point percentage season of his career. Last season, I think, was one of his worst. I think looking back, you could definitely tell that the foot injury, the ankle injury he had last year was definitely affecting his ability to shoot. But this week, doesn't matter if you're 39, because he's hitting 9 and he's looking fine.
We're good, streaky! Yes!
You know why? Because everyone now, it's a narrative of this thing called I have a bag, or he doesn't have a bag. It bothers the fuck out of me. Everyone thinks just because you get a favorable matchup that it means it's one-on-one time. Let's play ones. That's all you hear the kids talk about now. You wanna play ones? You wanna play ones? What the fuck is this? This is not Jordan versus Bird Nintendo. Like, it's 5-on-5.
And the clip that you just heard, which was referencing LeBron James and JJ Redick's pass, LeBron's talking about this concept of having a bag. And if you haven't heard about this, basically it's the idea that has really become prominent in sort of social media and just the media in general, that you have this sort of bag of tricks that you can play with. And the problem with that is that it kind of ignores the fact that basketball is a team sport. Sure, one-on-one, I can do cool stuff. Maybe I'm Steph Curry and I can do stuff between the legs, but like, what makes a team or a player really good is the team aspect of it. And the reason I bring this up is I think it's important to note, and I say this as someone who's commentating on sports, is that you should have your own fresh opinion about sports. Watch them on your own. Because the media will sometimes control narratives. And so I'm going to give you some examples, something that happened this week and something that just happens in general. So this week in basketball, like I talked about earlier, the Houston Rockets had 11-game win streak. And this would be surprising to some who, if you only listen to the pod, and Alperen Sengun got hurt. It looked like it was going to be season ending. It won't be, but he's still out for a bit. And during this time, Draymond Green, who's another young player for the Rockets, has popped off. He's had a bunch of 30-point games, I think even a 40-point game. And this has led to the media being like, oh, well, he's doing good now that Sengun's gone. Well, we have to trade one of them. And that just doesn't make sense, right? Just because, imagine this. Oh, your young player is doing good, so we need to trade your other young player who looks like an all-star because your young player is looking good. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, especially the Rockets. Their timeline is not winning this year, right? They're a young core. They're trying to build for the future, right? You pay Fred VanVleet a lot of money because he's a good veteran presence. He's probably not going to take your team to, win the championship, with sans Kawhi. But you could see that, the team is playing for the long run. In fact, they're doing so good now is awesome. But the media finds ways to do these narratives, to whether it's about trades, whether it's about players, and just be aware and vigilant when it comes to these narratives and conversations that happen, because sometimes they're not necessarily steeped or built in reality, or they're steeped and built in a reality that could be different than your own. So, like I'm saying, there's no reason to think, oh, we should trade Sengun because another player's doing well. But that's what's being said. And we see this happen all the time. That the second a team starts doing bad, we need to trade it away, right? I looked back to the Brooklyn Nets when you had KD, Harden, and Kyrie. There's been some insiders recently who said maybe the Nets shouldn't have blown up the team as quickly as they did. But there's no patience in this league anymore from social media or from media, and it leads to people making poor decisions. Like, for example, I'm sure there are more players this year playing hurt because they're trying to get to that 65-game thing. And why does the 65-game thing happen? It's a rule that they put in place. And it's a rule they put in place because the media was upset at how much people were sitting, right? And so other ways that we see the media controlling narratives. First, this year, Defensive Player of the Year. Wemby's been playing great. He's leading the league in blocks. He's really high up there in steals. He is just... He's got stonks, right? He has so many stonks. And the thing is that Wemby he's just so good, and he wasn't really part of the Defensive Player of the Year conversation because his team is bad. Now, I get it. The Spurs are bad. Their defense is bad without him, but their defense is good with him. And Defensive Player of the Year, he is the best defensive player to my eye this whole year. And now I know probably Rudy Gobert is going to get it because the Timberwolves are the best team defense in the league, and they are by quite a bit. So I want to be very clear. This is not me saying Gobert should not be getting Defensive Player of the Year. But the fact that Wemby is only now being part of that conversation when he's been one of the best defensive players for months is because of the way that the media controls narratives. We saw this last year in the MVP race. It was Jokic's to lose until we decided that we, being the media, I'm not part of the media, so I don't know why I said we. I just like using the royal we. It makes me feel fancy. Is that pretty much it was Jokic's to lose, and then all of a sudden Embiid started popping, the narrative switch, Embiid gets it. And then Jokic wins in the playoffs and Embiid does not. And all of a sudden the media looks silly for the way that the narrative conducted itself. And this goes back to the LeBron James kind of point in the podcast is when you are watching basketball, unless you're a person who really knows the X's and O's, there are probably a lot of things happening outside of your vision. And I don't mean literal vision, it's happening within your vision, but within your understanding, right? To you, what may seem like a bad defensive play could actually be another player being in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? But we don't know that for sure. And unless you know for exactly what the call is on the play or what the system is, it's often unfair in the way that we have these conversations because it is a team sport, right? It's true, Rudy Gobert is maybe one of the Timberwolves are the best defensive team, but is he the best defensive player? I don't know. And I'm not trying to give a definitive answer, but I think that we need to be more quizzical with these conversations, right? Because Rudy Gobert, had he had this season immediately after the COVID season, right, probably doesn't get Defensive Player of the Year. And so surprised he doesn't after what happened with him in the COVID and the microphone incident. And so the whole point is these awards, these conversations happen often outside of the players' conversations, or there's control, and there's a lack of understanding often by the media on what is being done. We see a lot of media shows now really lean into the debate kind of format. And as a speech and debate teacher, I want to tell you that often that's not a very good way of looking at sports. It's a good way to be pissed off, which works, it gets clicks and it gets these things, but just please be careful as you're going into it. Pay attention to these media narratives. I think to Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard, who have been made fun of constantly for their inability to be on the court, who have already hit their 65 game threshold to play far faster than probably a lot of other players we consider Iron Men or Iron folks, right? And again, the point here, the media is going to have their talking points, and these talking points may miss out on what's going on. Why is AD not part of the Defensive Player of the Year conversation? I don't know. He really hasn't been, but if you actually watch the games, he should be. And again, there's these narratives, or these conversations that happen, and I think people want to click to them. They want to stick. They want to be right about their takes. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I started the show off talking about how great I was for predicting Luka. And will I have the authenticity in the future if there's that mistake to call myself out? I'd like to think so. That's why I very intentionally have a segment that calls out my own stupidity, because I think that's healthy and necessary. Especially when you're making predictions, you're going to make mistakes. But the issue with sports media is there's no accountability, right? You make a terrible prediction that affects someone's life, and you get to sleep comfortably at night while that player has to think about what's being said or what's being told about them, or, oh, the reason I'm not getting millions and millions of dollars is because I'm not winning this award, and I'm not winning this award because other people who don't play basketball or have maybe ever played basketball are now voting for my own prowess. All right, soapbox, I will get off of you, but do your own watching, your own researching. This is why in every show I post on Spotify, on YouTube, I will always try to have a list of links in the show notes so that you can vet and look for yourself, because maybe you'll see something different than I did. And you know what I say to that? Beautiful. News and notes. All right, so we got some quick news and notes. So first, unfortunately, Kevin Huerter is out for the rest of the season after he had surgery on his shoulder. And also affecting the Kings, Malik Monk is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. So we may see him back in the playoffs, but he was an ACL or MCL sprain. And then in some other news and notes, and maybe not some good news and notes, Portland this week lost by 60, which was one of the highest or worst margins of victory by a team ever. But that's not the highlight. The news and notes is that we have a new record for worst plus minus in a single game. And that is by Scoot Henderson, who had a historically terrible game of minus 58 plus minus, which I remember earlier this year reporting the minus 57. And Scoot Henderson also, I think, has the third worst game ever. So he has the third and first worst game ever in terms of plus minus. And as someone who had him on his fantasy roster this year, aka me, that hurts. But it makes sense. And if you are a Blazers fan, you know, come back next year. Things could be better. You'll hopefully get a cool pick. I'm sorry.
Part of the season.
I feel good. I'm still feeling pretty good on the court. Just gonna keep it rolling.
What goes into you being able to be available for so many of these games this year?
Not tearing my ACL, not tearing my meniscus.
And continuing with news and notes, we're going to be looking at players that have hit the 65 game threshold. So if you're not familiar with this threshold, we've talked about it a bunch, but essentially, in order to win any important award, you need to hit at least 65 games throughout the year. Now, we still have a few games left, so if your favorite player is not on this list, don't worry. Now, the full list is currently 126 players. Don't worry, I'm not going to say 126 players. But I will point out players that are prominent features, maybe all-star level players, or those who could be in consideration of awards. So I'm going to be, again, 65 and up. So we have Tyrese Maxey, who, right now is the Sixers' one of their best players, especially with Embiid out. LeBron James at 39, hit 65 games today. Same with Luka Doncic, who's not 39. Then you have Victor Wembanyama, who I didn't expect to place, at the beginning of the year. One of my worst takes was that he would be nowhere near Rookie of the Year conversation because he wouldn't play enough games, and I was wrong. You also have Jaylen Brown, who's played 66 games for Boston. You have De'Aaron Fox, who's hit that threshold at 66. You have Kevin Durant, and James Harden, who both have hit 67 games. Jalen Suggs and Jalen Williams, the Jalen brothers, are also in that threshold. You have Gafford and Jaime Jaquez. Again, I'm trying to point out players that are important players on MVP or on important teams. Steph Curry hit 68. So did Rudy Gobert and Paul George. Then you also have Kawhi himself, who mentioned before, has 68. Hartenstein has 68. Grayson Allen, who's been amazing this year from three-point line, has 68. Derek White and Vassell. Vassell, the Spurs are not doing much, but he's been very good for them. Lillard for the Bucks has hit that 68 game threshold. Then you have Jason Tatum, and another Jalen Brunson, both at 69, which is a very nice number. D'Angelo Russell and Giannis are also at 69. Klay Thompson, even though he's not played great, has hit 70 games. AD, the street clothes himself, not street clothes anymore, with 70 games played so far this year. And Shea with 71. And then you also have you also have now getting into this higher echelon, you have Josh Hart for the Knicks. You kind of see in this tier, maybe not players, so you have Anthony Edwards, but some players on maybe not as great of teams who are really putting in work, and you have lots of Knicks players. You have Dante DiVincenzo with 73. You have my boy Jordan Poole with 73. You have Sohan all the way up with 74. Sabonis was 74. Chet was 74. But then your group of players who've played the most games so far. So I have a big list at 75, which is the second most games played this year. So we have George Niang, Dennis Schroeder. I'm just going to say all these players, even if they're not great players. Colin Sexton, Christian Brown, Austin Reeves was 75, and Andre Drummond himself. I would never have anticipated him to have the second most games in the season. But currently, your champion? I don't know if champion's the word, but the most games played by two. He's my buddy and your buddy, Buddy Hield, which I think part of it could be the trade netted him an extra game, from the Pacers to the Sixers. But I just think it's really interesting, and pay attention to these game thresholds. All those players I've mentioned, and There's some, I'm sure, important players that I left off that list that you might be interested, are all very close to, have already hit that threshold, and you don't have to worry about that. Kind of borderline on the threshold who could be getting conversations for, awards. You have Bam at 63, Ingram at 63, Brandon Ingram. You also have Zion Williamson at 63, who's right there. Russell Westbrook at 62, which could matter for a 6 Man of the Year situation. You have Devin Booker, who's at 60. Cat, who unfortunately will stay at 60 and not get to his 65. CJ McCollum, who's been great this year, but only at 58, so he can't really miss another game. There's it. Thank you for joining us for another week of the Omni Sports NBA podcast. Please leave us a review. If you like what we're doing, let us know. If you hear scratch in the background, that's my cat, who's decided that during this moment's the best moment to claw, to scratch his claws on his scratching post. But that's okay. Sometimes we gotta scratch. And an itch that I would love scratched is more people listening to the show. So if you have any friends who you think that would enjoy this show, enjoy this content, let them know. If you have friends who maybe aren't basketball friends, but they're into baseball, well, soon my friend Zach and I are going to be starting a baseball podcast, which will probably be every 2 weeks rather than this weekly show that I'm doing for basketball. And please check us out on our Discord, follow us wherever you get podcasts, rate us, subscribe, like, do all the things that keep you connected to what we're doing, because I don't want to lose connection to you, and hopefully you don't lose connection to me. And on that note, I hope you have a wonderful and beautiful week.